Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on-demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team to reduce the potential for fraud, compliance fines, and just overall bad vendor data. So sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. Do you and your team know what to do if there is a fraudulent payment? Well, if you want 5 steps that are probably not in your IT team's fraud response plan, keep listening. Welcome to episode 396. Build a fraud response plan so you know what to do if a fraudulent payment happens. Now, this recording was taken from a webinar that I did, and it has very good information. I will tell you, though, that I do have a presentation PDF, so while you won't be able to follow through on the video portion, if you want to follow through using the presentation PDF, you can do that. So I have put a link to where you can go to the webinar, do a very quick registration on the Vendor Process Training Center, and then download the PDF. If you would like to follow along with the PDF, or you know what, since you'll be registering on the Vendor Process Training Center, you can actually just watch the actual recording there if you prefer to do that. So again, I will put a link to that in the show notes. And now here is that recording. Yes, we've got more people jumping on. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so we are right at the top of the hour, and there's lots of information to get to, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. So welcome to this monthly webinar series in 5 steps, and this month we're going to be talking about build a fraud response plan so you know what to do if business email compromise or BEC happens in 5 steps. I think I'm the queen of long titles, but this is going to be very critical if you don't have that in place. And so this is a great topic for this month. So I am Debra R. Richardson, and this webinar is sponsored by Financial Operations Network, and there will be more information on their bank account validation, ownership, or bank account ownership solutions, so you can stop fraudulent payments resulting from business email compromise even before it starts, or preventing them from happening in the first place. But first, we do have some housekeeping items. So keep in mind this session will be recorded. We will send you a link for the recording within 24 hours. And just as a reminder, when you receive the links, it will be a separate link than what you use to register for the live webinar, just just because we have to put it on a separate, create a separate event for it so we can attach the PDF, the handouts to that recording. And so feel free when you receive it to share it with any colleagues or any team members that you think would find this content valuable. Next, just go ahead and submit your questions anytime. Don't wait. We'll have probably about 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes at the end for questions. And so you don't want to kind of waste some of that time by having to, at that point, type your questions in. So make sure you get them in anytime. You can put them in the question/chat area. And then lastly, don't forget to download the handouts. There are 3. Of course, there is a PDF of the presentation. There is also a PDF from Financial Operations Networks. It's actually really good about how to reduce the risk of payment fraud. So make sure you download that. And then I also have, if you're interested in vendor process training, a vendor process training schedule for 2024. And all the training is on vendor setup and maintenance processes, how to avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data. Now, just a very quick bio of me. Again, I am Debra R. Richardson. I am a certified fraud examiner, but I used to be an AP practitioner. I was AP senior manager over global vendor setup and maintenance, and we processed 2,000 requests per month, and we also maintained 140,000 active vendors across 7 different ERPs. And as you can imagine, that is a lot of potential for fraud. And when we did have a fraudulent payment, our IT or InfoSec team followed the trail of the fraudulent payment, and then they also traced the email. However, there was one thing that I didn't realize that me and my team had to do, and that is one of the 5 steps that you will hear. So now let's take a look at the agenda. So first, we're going to talk about why it's getting harder to avoid a fraudulent payment, and it is getting harder. We'll talk about what is a fraud response plan, what needs to be included in there, and then we'll look at the 5 steps. And then lastly, again, we'll have up to maybe 5 minutes for Q&A. But first, we do have a poll question, and I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And that poll question is, do you have an automated solution for verifying bank account ownership? And go ahead and select the correct answer for your company. Is that yes? Is it no, but planning to deploy one in 6 months? Is it no, but planning to deploy one in 6 to 12 months? Or no, and no plans to deploy it. So go ahead and select the applicable option. It looks like we've got almost 50%. Let's give about 10 more seconds for those of you that haven't responded to go ahead and select the appropriate answer. Hopefully we can get up to 70, 80%. Right now we have, we did just that. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. And thanks, everyone. We got up to 92%. Thanks, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. And then let me go ahead and share the results. And so it looks like the highest is 39%, no and no plans to deploy one. So maybe you might change your mind after this webinar. And then 30% was no, but planning to deploy one within 6 to 12 months. And then 26% said yes. And then lastly, 4% says no, but they plan to deploy one within 6 months. So thanks everyone for that. And now let's start with why it's getting harder to avoid a fraudulent payment. And so I've got 5 reasons. I am sure there are probably more, but you will probably recognize at least one or more. So the first thing is fraudsters are using malicious LLMs, so not ChatGPT, but Fraud GPT, Worm GPT, right, to create those convincing fraudulent emails so that they appear more legitimate. It also means that there are no more immediate red flags like poor grammar, because the LLMs will generate it with proper grammar, and also perhaps the correct context as well. The next thing is that phishing has been so successful, or the fraudsters just go out on the dark web and buy, right, our user credentials because it's out there. There have been so many breaches, right? So fraudsters now are in our vendors' email inbox, sending those remittance change requests, so it appears more legitimate. But not only are they in the email sending those change requests, but they're sending it from a historical email string to make you think that it is that much more authentic or legitimate. And so the next one is fraudsters are using deepfake audio and video to allay suspicion. So we've seen examples of that. The 25 million that was sent based on a fraudulent or a deepfake video, and then also 35 million was sent because a controller thought that the finance director called him because it sounded just like him. But what they're doing is they're sending a suspicious email, right, saying, hey, I need a secret payment, but then allaying those suspicions by saying, hey, let's jump on a video call, or let me call you. And so that has resulted in fraud as well, those fraudulent payments. And then next, we all think, well, maybe we don't think, but other people may think, right, that the confirmation call is that silver bullet. Those are typically those folks that have not tried to make that confirmation call. It's very hard to get the vendor on the phone, and it's really not guaranteed to prevent a payment from being sent to a fraudulent account. And there was an example in what happened to the city of Portland. Their treasury team asked to have that confirmation call done twice. It was actually made once, but it still resulted in a fraudulent payment. And by the way, if you are not the one that is performing that confirmation call, let me just say that you don't know really what that person that is performing, or those team members that are performing those confirmation calls, you really don't know what they're doing. In some cases, they are actually using the information in the email because they don't have anything else. I know you and I know that's not good, but sometimes the people we have that are performing the confirmation call may not understand that, or they may just want to hurry up and get their work done. So that does happen. And then lastly, a fraudulent payment is discovered too late to prevent multiple frauds. So what's happening is that when one fraud is successful, fraudsters will continue or may continue to perpetrate fraud against your company just because it worked the first time. So one town, and I'll have an example in a minute, found out the hard way with multiple fraudulent check payments that totaled up to $1 million before they even discovered it. Now, unless you have a way to mitigate business email compromise, like the bank account ownership validation with financial operation networks, vendor info, standalone validation portal, or their vendor self-registration portal, then you need to be prepared for when fraud happens. And so let's talk about that, what really should be, what should be included, or what should a fraud response plan include. And so that fraud response plan may be called an incident response plan. It may be included in that, and it's just like a business continuity plan. Hopefully everyone had one at the start of the pandemic, but the fraud response plan should be at the company level with instruction for the vendor setup and maintenance process. Now, according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, in their report, Managing the Business Risk of Fraud, a practical guide, and I did put a link there so you can link to it. A fraud response plan should include who should perform the investigation, how the investigation should be performed, when a voluntary disclosure to the government, if at all, right, should be made, how to determine the remedial action, how to remedy control deficiencies identified, and how to administer disciplinary action. And so for the vendor setup and maintenance process, these considerations are directly related to recovering fraudulent payments, as well as onboarding new vendors and changing existing vendor data in your vendor master file. And so with that, let's go ahead and start with the 5 steps to build a fraud response plan. And so step 1 is really to assign roles, like who's going to perform each task. Make it clear who is going to take specific steps. Make sure they are authorized and have the required access to carry them out. So an example is make sure that whomever you have contacting your bank, for example, has the proper access and authority with the bank, or authority to talk to the bank representatives. Also, who's going to provide the notifications, right, to the vendor, to the bank, to the insurance company. And then who's going to perform the investigation? This can be IT, it can be the information security team, may differ at your company. And then what else, right? What other tasks that might be unique to your company that you need to assign roles in order to perform? Now, step 2 is definitely create a contact list. So make sure you include both internal and external contacts. So internal could be your leadership, and make sure that you identify them along with their contact information. Also could be your IT and your InfoSec or information security team. Again, make sure you include their names, their contact information, and then externally, right, their contacts, your bank, and maybe also the bank that received the funds. Maybe you're going to report it to the local FBI office. They would love that because every year they do a report on the complaints that they receive, and that just helps us follow trends and make sure that they are measuring business email compromise and the effects and the average loss, right, correctly. So if you plan on reporting it, who you're going to report to, and then also that contact information. Same thing with the police, because the police actually have been successful in recovering some of the funds, so include that contact information. Again, your insurance company, and then also your vendor, because they may not know. Now, step 3 is to define the investigation process. So you want to make sure that you identify the information to include. So the date of occurrence, the vendor or multiple vendors that are involved, how it happened, and then also the documentation that is needed for the investigation and where it is stored. And so you'll want to identify what vendor supporting documents are collected. You'll want to save the email that was received, because that could have a lot of red flags or clues in it, as that will lead them to either the method or how they perpetrated the fraud or actually who the fraudsters were. You also want to document the validations, right, that were performed. And so you'll want to make sure you document which validations were required and then also which ones were performed. It should be the same, but it could be different. And then also the requester name and email address, or multiple requester names and email addresses. And then also document the internal employee that has a relationship with the vendor. This could be a buyer for a PO vendor, but it also could be just a regular internal employee for a non-PO vendor. Now, make sure again that you identify where these are stored, and also make sure that you are storing all applicable supporting documentation for the requests that you receive via email, the forms that you require, the emails, the validations, take screenshots of them. And so if an investigation is necessary, all that information is available where it's stored, either on your accounting system or ERP, on the vendor record, or if you have a secure drive that you're saving those on. Now, step 4, this is the step that I didn't realize we needed to take. This was researching vendor master file changes. And I suggest, it could be different for you, that you check the time period 60 days before and after the incident, right, depending on when it was discovered, since many times, again, companies are only alerted of a fraud after a vendor misses the payments. So there could be more fraudulent information in your vendor master file that has yet to be detected, because again, fraudsters continue to target you like they did with Huntsville. In the example I talked about earlier, they targeted them multiple times with check washing scams. And so if you want to read more there, I've included a link to that article. But the way you would do that is run a report from your accounting system or ERP and pull new vendors added and existing vendors changed. Verify how that information was received. Just run that investigation process, right? Verify how it was received, the supporting documentation, review that, review the validations performed, and if there were any irregularities, with the goal of identifying suspicious activity to determine if fraud has been perpetrated. So maybe you will discover a fraud that just happened, and if that's the case, you might be able to even stop the payment from being generated, right, pulled into the pay file. Or if it's already gone to the bank, you may now have enough time to recover it. So this is a key part of the fraud response plan that is typically done by the vendor setup and maintenance team, or AP, or whoever handles your vendor maintenance process. Now, if you want to read a little bit more on that, I do have a LinkedIn article that I wrote on it. And so you can click the read more to read more on that. Now, the last one, step 5, is now that you have identified that there is a fraud, you have checked to see if there's any additional frauds. Now you have to say what you're going to do go forward, right? So define the remedial process. Now, as some companies will absorb the loss, but I've also seen where other companies will not, especially if the vendor's email was hacked and a legitimate email address requested the change. And so you have to determine which your company will do, and then maybe even have some contract language about how fraudulent payments will be handled. But you do need to determine how the fraudulent payment will be resolved, what process changes need to be made, filling in or plugging up those gaps that can allow in fraud, and then what disciplinary actions will be taken. And speaking of the process changes that you might, that may need to be made on the vendor training schedule that I included as a part of the handouts, there are 3 free training sessions. One of them is
plugging up the gaps in your vendor master or your vendor setup and maintenance process. And it all talks about a 5 or 7-step process to plug up those gaps. And it's a free training, so make sure you check that out if you are interested. All right, so that is it. Building a response plan so you know what to do if a fraudulent electronic payment happens in 5 steps. So first step was to assign roles. The second step was to create a contact list. The third step was to define the investigation process. The fifth step was to research or the fourth step was to research vendor master file changes. And then the fifth step was define your remedial process.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. And again, if you would like to get the presentation PDF, I have put a link to that webinar on the Vendor Process Training Center in the show notes. So you can click through, download the PDF. And I don't think I had any other attachments to it, but if I did, you will be able to download those as well. So thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 396th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. And don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.